Let's get started. That was a very long intro of myself. I was blushing, but this is. So I was telling my 80-year-old mom, because she was asking me, what do I do every day? So I'm like, okay, as the industry's first women chief AI officer, I got to do 3 very interesting things. I lead 50,000 data and AI practitioners in Accenture globally. I also got to manage the decisions to spend the investment of our $3 billion investment in data and AI. And of course, I got the opportunity to work with amazing clients and partners in AI every day. So let me tee this up a little bit. I think the why I believe that this is the next 45 minutes or an hour you need to be paying attention to. This is a very important topic. So the theme of Gen AI is what we will focus on. As many of you know, now we are getting into the 3rd year of Gen AI. Right, we did not have the terrible 2 of Gen AI, luckily, but there was so many amazing developments, right, for this technology. I think on the foundation model side, as what we heard from the previous panels, right, there was just remarkable developments, with all the foundation models. I think what got me very excited is the reasoning capabilities of some of the larger scale models, such that those models started doing inferencing side compute as opposed to the training side compute. So I believe that this kind of models will continue to be advancing. But I think for all the leaders I have invited to the panel today, we are thinking about slightly different problems, right? So how do we tap into this magic power of foundation models to actually bring them right into enterprise organizations, public sector, private sectors, so that our business leaders right can actually start realizing the promised benefits of Gen AI? I think I can say this is one of the most important questions that in our panelists' mind. And I think there are so many. It's not easy, right? We talk about lots of concerns with cost, lots of concerns with accuracies, safety, performance, risk. So that's why I want to invite everyone to share their perspective, how we can collectively embrace AI in enterprise and scale AI in enterprise. So that's the overall framing. With that being said, I would like to have all my panelists introduce themselves. Maybe I start from Vala, who's all the way sitting over there.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm Chief Evangelist at Salesforce. I've known the company for 22 years, 12 years as a customer, almost 10 as an employee. And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bhavesh Dayalji. I have 2 roles. I'm the CEO of Kensho Technologies, an AI company that was acquired by S&P Global, and I also serve as S&P Global's Chief AI Officer. I've been doing that for a while.
Hi, everyone. I'm Soumya Seetharam. I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer at Corning. For those of you who don't know, Corning's a 173-year-old material science, optical science, glass science company. And I've been there for 2 years, spent several years in Intel and oil and gas and GE prior to that.
Hi, I'm Savannah Tace. I'm a research scientist and adjunct professor at the Data Science Institute at Columbia. I run a lab called the Science, Society, and AI Lab, where we do work at the intersection of fundamental AI research and societal impact. I teach AI ethics for our data science program, and I run the Data Science Institute Scholars.
Thanks for having me here. This is Rose May. I'm the VP of Business Planning and Data AI for Tronox. That is a vertical integrated mining and chemical manufacturing with global operations across 6 continents. I've more than 20 years experience in various industries, all the way from entertainment to manufacturing and then logistics, and then across a lot of different business functions. So in the company, I'm often referred as the bridge between business and technology, as well as the planning function I'm leading is considered or referred as the brain of the company, that linking executive team to all the way different functions, as well as from the coverage is from strategic planning, capital investment optimization and to the daily, weekly execution. So I'm actually one of the MIT alumni. In the past 2 years, I also had the certificate in artificial intelligence business strategy from MIT, as well as cybersecurity from Harvard. So yeah, I hope my mixed background and experience bring some different perspectives to this important topic of Gen AI and what's next for business.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we have an array of experts, right, from different industries, academia, partners. So let me start from the first question I would like to ask everyone, okay? So what is the generative AI use case? I will frame it this way. What is the most exciting, important generative AI use case that you want to discuss, you want to share with us? Because I know if all of you have probably hundreds of use cases that you can discuss, but what is that number one that you would like for everyone to know? Maybe we start from Vala again.
Oh, cool. I get the first questions. I was hoping if I sat here, I would be last. No, I'm kidding. So I have the fortune to see at my company with our hundreds of thousands of customers use AI across all front office applications, sales, service, marketing, commerce. So it's asking me about my favorite child. It's all the use cases are super exciting. And at my company, we're beyond the generative phase. We're studying the autonomous enterprise and autonomy in business. So agentic AI, how we can use language models and generate content, but also generate action. So it's as a practitioner I was a Salesforce customer for 12 years. I love that software can help remove friction. I think that's the superpower of software. And our journey started 10 years ago in terms of studying the importance and integrating AI into our software. And we're now at a point where we're not building software that can help you do the work. We're actually building software that does the work alongside you. So in the future events like this, we'll be talking about digital employees and digital colleagues. And a year from now, if we're back here at the second BIG.AI Summit, my company will most likely have 1 billion plus active agents. And that means a lot of work, a lot of friction will be removed in business. And we'll deliberately remove silos. Silos kill businesses, in my opinion, also careers and organizations. So that's another superpower of all the use cases that I see. And one common thing with all the use cases across whether it's sales, service, commerce, all the front office applications, is that we're no longer talking about cost reduction. We're talking about waste reduction. And the coolest use cases helps us deliberately remove waste. All waste have a cost associated with it, but not all costs are wasteful. So I think business leaders are now applying a more precision approach in terms of optimization and efficiency, where we're building consensus on what is wasteful. And then once we all agree, then we go after removing that waste.
I love that last phrase that you just said, right? The removing waste, eliminating waste, or even minimizing waste, right? This ultimately is the objective of every business leader, because resources are scarce, right? So every day we're weighing, how do I optimize my decision? So I love how you frame it.
Yeah, nobody in business raises it. I love waste. We want waste. But when you start talking about cost,
yes,
everyone has a different point of view. And so I think you just shift the conversation a bit and you can make faster progress.
Perfect. Okay, Bhavesh, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to live in the present. And so I think it's really important to do that. Everybody says that, right, about your personal lives and so on. Live in the present. And so one of the things I'm really most excited about is all of you. I think if you look at how you do your roles, if you look at how your peers and perhaps your teams do their roles, it's kind of boring in a lot of cases. And the differentiated work that you all want to be doing for your company, for yourselves, is quite minimal. And if you think about generative AI, large language models, AI in general, it should be bringing you up higher up the value chain to do that differentiated work. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is, continuing to educate our workforce, so making sure that they understand AI and the impact of AI on their roles and how they do their roles. And then secondly, it's like, how do you give them the tools to do this differentiated work and innovate using generative AI? And the things that we've been doing at S&P Global and even in our company is setting a foundation for that. I completely agree that agents are going to be the future. But I'm sure that many of our organizations still aren't even really walking on the impact of using generative AI to the businesses that you have and actually capturing that value. And I think most of our companies aren't necessarily tech companies. And so we've got to upskill ourselves, think about this kind of migration to AI and the platforms that are created, and think about how it impacts our teams and our organizations. Because I don't buy that you're going to be able to go from here to full autonomy in the future. And I think there's so much more education still yet to be done. And it's human nature for some reason now for us all to just accelerate to nirvana and we're all heading to Mars. And it's just like, hang on a second. So half of us can't even figure out what our passport is in our organization.
So well said. And just a little bit on my cliff note, Bhavesh and I actually been working together, bringing Gen AI Academy training program to 35,000 S&P Global employees. We're also exploring how we actually bring model evaluation into financial industries, right? So something quite innovative his team is doing. All right, so Soumya, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's getting less technical as you come down this panel. He's a digital native. He works in financial services, which is still people and data. And my company is research and manufacturing. So it's a very different world for us. We have, like I said, a company is 173 years old. I have manufacturing footprint globally, and some of our equipment are decades old. So how do you bring that into the new world? One of the things that we're really excited about is this use case of a manufacturing assistant. So think about grounding foundational models with our standard operating procedures, our corrective action logs, your maintenance logs, and then hooking up that to the line. So as the manufacturing line is working in real time, you can actually use the data to see the performance. And you can also actually detect if there is any issue. And oh, by the way, if you add knowledge base into that, you can now tell the manufacturing operator what to do to go fix the issue if something's happening. So it's actually making our operators much more productive and savvy without adding additional headcount. It helps us onboard new operators faster. So in a very legacy environment, a grimy shop floor, if you may, you're seeing technology that's being used by a manufacturing operator to do the operations more seamlessly with better quality and better reliability, if you may.
That's an awesome story. I have to tell you, I think your company, the products is just amazing. I grew up in China. At least when I first came to the US 30 years ago, I have never used any Tupperware, right, from Corning. So that was an amazing experience. And also in my marketing science course at that time, I first time learned the term of Tupperware effect. So food is important. Packaging is also very important. All right, Savannah?
Yeah, so I'm a scientist by training, so that might bias my answer, but I am very excited about the applications of generative AI in science, particularly in simulation and synthetic data for scientific applications. So a lot of the ways that we historically have generated data for training and evaluating models, for developing robotic systems that interact with the physical world, for doing things like materials design, drug design, protein design, have been with first principles scientific software, which is typically very computationally expensive to run, and we've seen incredible advances with generative AI in speeding that up, making it cheaper, being able to predict the way that materials will form, what properties they'll have, without having to do costly in-lab experiments. So I think there's a lot of exciting things to come. There's a startup Cusp that recently launched that's doing energy-friendly materials development for green energy and energy efficiency, and I think we're going to see a lot more things like that.
Wonderful. I think as the last panelist was discussing, AI in science is the next frontier, right? Spatial intelligence and all of this. And I cannot wait to work with your team to bring some awesome research into the commercial realm. All right, Rose, what is your most exciting use case?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe first give some context. So the company I'm working with is a mining and a chemical vertical integrated. So similar like Soumya's domain, probably, but the different challenge is have same challenge as we're losing operator knowledge, and now we need the young operators to be able to operate at a much senior level immediately. But on the other hand, some of the context is we already built I think this morning, the first session, Professor Rita mentioned that you have the enterprise optimization model we already built, having it's more the digital twin of the business. So we're already using that with full financials back end to support the scenario planning decisions. But what we're missing is two ends of it. One is on the commercial side. That's where we're testing right now, is understand the market cycle, because it's a industry has heavy investment on CapEx. And then it takes a long time. I mean, for mining, you cannot say, okay, I actually need this right now, but it's going to take 2 years before you do anything about it. So all the decisions much upfront. So we spend a lot of effort predict market cycle. On the other hand, what I'm excited about those use cases is the type of project focus on high value, because in this case, it's our decision of capital investment of mining assets. But it's also combined internal, external data, because understand the market, you're pretty much going to go search a lot of, we're using hundreds of market index to predict those. So certainly on the data foundation side, we will need to invest on that. But for this case, is also for our customer service level, understand all the orders and where they are. We're vertical integrated, have a lot of products ship around among ourselves, our assets, but also ship to customers. So with that, already have the data foundation is to bring external data back, or identify all the materials globally where they are, combine with our commercial traditional order data and understand the customer needs from the external market intelligence. So that all combined together is what we want to test, or is just kick off the testing. Is leverage GenAI capabilities to help. Currently, this is a lot of manual process, a lot of people manually trying to bridge different data type and get some insights. But with that, just you would, understand the market change can feed into our enterprise optimization model, so you get simulation on what action need to take. With all that, a lot of business value or things you cannot do in the past without the GenAI is what excites me, because it's certainly productivity gain, but also a lot of new capabilities that was not possible in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think doing something impossible before, now possible, I think that's one of the common theme, right? And raising the humans' ability to do better things and reducing waste in the society. I think those are the couple very interesting things that all the panelists is discussing. So we're not here just to talk about use case, right? So I know every panelist can probably spend 2 hours and sharing their industry knowledge, what they are seeing in their enterprise as hot and exciting. But we all know this is not easy. right? Especially now we're talking about scaling Gen AI in enterprise, meaning enterprise, across all functions. All your employees are adopting Gen AI. We want to shift to the challenges side. Okay, so at least my personal opinion, there are a lot of data readiness issues. There's a lot of integration, lots of legacy tech systems, right? Because Gen AI doesn't work alone. People readiness, even in Accenture, that's a big topic, right? How do we get our data scientists ready for Gen AI? So maybe I will start from, not Vala this time, Bhavesh, but on the topic of tech readiness. So with your work in high-stakes financial environments, how are you approaching AI architecture and technology readiness to ensure scalable Gen AI applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think you started answering that. I think for us in financial services, and if you think about our customers, and if you think about regulatory concerns and things like that, there are two main things that we've got to get right. One is, how do we use our relevant data as part of any generative AI solution? Mm-hmm. And that really starts with, how do you make sure your data is AI ready? And in fact, this week we launched a Kensho LLM API, which is specifically built to interact with large language models and big models like ChatGPT's GPT model series, Anthropic's, and so on. And we've even got that kind of API involved in the GPT store where you can start using it. And the work that we did there was all around preparing our data to interact with these powerful models, right? Like, so a lot of you have heard of RAG solutions, meaning like retrieval augmented generation. So how do you use your own data as part of a solution? But the other part that's hasn't been talked about enough is a lot of the data that we have is really structured. It's this tabular data, this data that sits in databases. And actually these models aren't that great at generating SQL queries to actually retrieve that information as part of a solution. So we've been working on that deeply, because I do think that connecting your data to large language models, to these generative AI applications are going to be the difference, right? Like, you're not going to always be able to use this pre-trained model to then put in production some solution that customers are going to use. I think the other thing that's really important is evaluations. And so, we've been partnering, as you know, on our S&P AI benchmarks. And really, this was around, we've got all these models, we've got all these solutions. How do you ensure that these are the right kinds of solutions that impact production workflows? And what I mean by that is, how do you test the efficacy of this solution? How do you make sure it's accurate enough to actually drive a workflow or a decision? And part of our work in doing that was really a lot of the research that we did as part of Kensho, and think of Kensho as an AI innovation hub for S&P Global. But that work that we were doing kind of led us to this idea that, how do we know that the solution is actually what we expect it to be? So we went to go and partner with our domain experts across S&P Global customers and asked them, what would you expect to see? And we created these evaluation sets that we could test these models on. A lot of you have heard of hallucinations, drifts in models, and things like that. And one of the things that we want to do is ground it in a common evaluation in domains that we're experts in. Financial services, commodity markets, our ratings business, and so on. And how do we ensure that then we bring that to the community as a whole to say, this is how you should evaluate models, this is how you should think about solutions. And that's going to get us closer and closer to production and actually driving value, because gone are the days where we can, come up with some kind of YOLO solution and throw it up at a board and say, hey, look, generative AI, isn't it cool? We're heading here. But then when you think about, are we going to get it in production? There's a long line of things you've got to do. And I think I would just comment on those two things again that I think are super important. Your data readiness, so making sure AI-ready data is top of mind, because that's your differentiator as a business. And secondly, how are you evaluating the solutions? Because oftentimes people don't think that. They just think, hey, here you go.
Exactly. And I think on the evaluation point, we oftentimes link this to the large language model evaluation, right? MMLU, Helm, all this. But now enterprise leaders are asking the same thing. Don't just show me the robustness, groundness of the models. I want to know the efficacy of all these models when are adapted into the financial services, customer contact center. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing together on that. Vala, you have a question?
Just to add to that, according to Gartner, only 4% of enterprise has data ready to be ingested.
We're part of the 4%.
Yeah. So vast majority do not have even access to data. Our research shows an average enterprise has about 900 plus software applications, and only 25% are connected. So your data is trapped in your business, and vast majority don't have enriched tag data to be used in language models. Now, our research also shows that CIOs are spending almost 20% of their budget on data infrastructure and 5% on AI solutions. Every AI project begins and ends or lives as a data project. So infrastructure assessment, benchmarking, investments is key to your success.
So well said. So well said. I think that, again, this is what I call the enterprise messiness, right?
Sorry, just one last point. Sorry, and I promise I'll shut up. I think the challenge, though, is as experts, we believe this. You know, if you go into a boardroom or executive management teams, it's kind of boring. Like, data is not what they want to talk about. They actually want to talk about the application, the sexy thing. And I think there's work that we've still got to do to educate boards and executive management teams around, you can't get to the sexy part unless you do this. And we still haven't fixed it.
I completely agree. I think that's why this whole panel is mission-driven, right? It's not press a button like what you experience with the ChatGPT for enterprise AI. So I think, Bhavesh, to answer that question, I actually want to turn it to Soumya, right? I think, she's one of the CDIO. So as Corning is a CDIO, how are you approaching data management analytics in Gen AI to create connected ecosystem and optimize decision making? Maybe share with us more around the data, management best practices that you're using.
Yeah, and I think both of them were absolutely right. We have been on this data journey for a few years now, and I think I can say with some level of confidence, we have more than 70% of your business transaction data that's been ingested into a data platform. And we've put the right security controls on it so it can actually be accessed by the people the right way. This is all structured data, and that's the easier part of it. Now, it wasn't easy to get all this data in because other than 900, we have like 2,000 plus applications. Wow. So
average was 900.
Yeah. So we're on the higher side of it, but at least we're in the 4%, hopefully, because we've been able to tap into it. But it's the structured data. Our big challenge, honestly, is the unstructured data. And when you look at it, especially for a company that's 173 years old, we are appreciably smaller percentage of that data that's in our data platform. And that's because some of this data is decades old. You need to actually figure out how to categorize it, cleanse it, et cetera, and bring it in a form that can be useful. And we even have data that's maybe a century old. So think about it. That's the challenge. And honestly, that's the next frontier for us. Business transactions data, the other thing now that we're striving for is how can we have people talk to data? So maybe something like Generative BI. That's the thing that we're playing around with and saying, we have it, it's great, you can have your dashboards and everything else, but it's easier if people can query the data and get the answers that they want instead of having to train people to decipher the dashboard. So we're working on both fronts, but for us, the challenge is how do you get this unstructured data and bring it into our platform, secure it, and make sure that it's available to be tapped into by the business to drive value.
That's very good insights, and I think for all the innovators here, if you have an easy button for unstructured data in enterprise, let us know. Okay, so I will turn it over to Rose. So on the topic of approving ROI, right? You talk to your board all the time. They're asking, show me concrete ROI of Gen AI investment. So what strategies have you found effective in maximizing ROI for Gen AI at Tronox?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe first, because earlier I was saying what's the shiny object that is actually not experienced when getting to board meeting or executive meeting. The question is always, where's the value?
Where's the money?
Yeah, that's right. So in that sense, I'm very practical. I'm not really chasing shiny object. I think the team worked with me will all know about that. But same thing, we are having tremendous data challenges. Although there's a small core group in the company that they run more advanced technologies and they're comfortable with the data, and that's mostly embedded in the team I'm leading because of I mentioned we have the enterprise optimization model built a couple years already mimic, it's like digital twin of the business. But what we don't have is the level down to the operating level, and then just like Sonia mentioned, all those thinking about all the equipment they're sending Internet of Things, all the data, we sitting on tons of data, but we haven't get a chance to harmonize or so right now the journey starts is how we build our modern digital core, and that will be immediate focus because otherwise if we just jumping around the Gen AI use cases, we're not going to go too far. Because we all know as we have the financial model with the whole business built in, so very easy for me, for example, to simulate, okay, what if this assets, this unit down, what's the cost of the whole business? So instead of trying to do a traditional calculation, what we do is a quick simulation on what happened without it. That will quickly tell me what is the value of that one area. So that's how we kind of look at return of investment. But seeing that will be first the foundation build, that to me it's like a no negotiable. It's a mandate. You're going to have it before you can jump too far. And then second, certainly to address the value question, return on investment, quick return is leverage the internal team who already have the business knowledge as we're building foundation. Prioritize those business-related use cases so that you have the value start to show already as you're building data foundation. Meanwhile, the most valuable assets in the company is operation-related, and that's the most complex data set. It's not only all those many years of accumulated engineering knowledge, drawings, as well as all those history maintenance records, what happened, I think earlier I mentioned you need a complete data to mimic the situation. So a lot of what event happened, how it was fixed, whether it worked or not, that's like all in different places. And so one thing, you need to digitalize all that and bring it in one place, which will be the digital core, then feed into whatever model build, then we'll get to the real return. So we have to work through all those things. But I guess the one advice I would have is building the core, the digital core foundation, leverage what you already have, because certainly each company should have their the leader that can bridge business and technology. Then do that design is what are the things is easy with foundation build, return value already, and then tackle the more complex but higher value item is on the way that also allow a small group to experiment. I mean, it is the pivot point with this technology, but you will need the internal team to be built up and the talent develop, and that group allow them to experiment and allow them to fail, but learning. So in that case, when those are done, you can rapidly get return instead of if you're just jumping around and not having the digital core foundation. It's going to take, I think you can think about there will be return, but as time goes by, you would feel you're constantly getting into the trouble as not be able to leverage the Gen AI model properly.
So I think that's very good advice. Invest in digital core, focus on what you have first, and accelerate the timing of the ROI realization. I think before I turn it over to the next two panelists, I think there's this almost like the natural stopping point, right? I think so far the three panelists share what they consider as the key building blocks, right, to scale Gen AI. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not here just to talk about use cases, right? Use cases get you excited, but there's a long way to get to the value, right? So how do we actually take a platform-based approach, right? Figuring out a lot of commonalities within all these use cases, so that enterprise will be making a decision: do they need to be actually investing in a platform right now, or they continue to be doing experimentation? So I can tell you, this is kind of a strategic decision a lot of the business leaders are making these days. So very important for them to set a strategy, right, for this kind of Gen AI revolution for the next couple years. With that being said, I will turn it over to, I think, the next speaker. Vala, I'm coming back to you. So on the topic of people and customer readiness, with your experience in digital evangelism, which is a cool term, how should companies prepare their talent and customers for scale Gen AI? And what are the right skills needed?
Great question. After listening to the morning session, I realized I need to go back and develop my own theory on skills and components I need to add to my repertoire. Just my mind was expanded so much in the first half of today's conference. So I'll start maybe answering backwards. I have a daughter who's a senior in college. In high school, she started for her summer job, teach coding. So she started with Java and JavaScript, and then computer science is her major. So she's been exposed to, Python, Scala, Julia, R, all the cool programming languages that Dad is now, jealous that she's got more skills than I do. So I was super proud. I'm like, all right, she's really programming, critical thinking. This is awesome. But then I hear the CEO of Google talk about 25% of the all new code at Google is generated by AI. 50% of GitHub is generated by AI. So I'm like, all right. So I'm fast forwarding. Mark Andreessen, I think 15 some odd years ago, said software is eating the world. It looks like AI is eating software. So now I'm a little bit less bullish about, should you become hardcore programmer? My middle daughter, who's a freshman in college, she's the best writer in the family. And I've written a couple of books and thousands of articles. She's a better writer than I am. And I told her, hey, it's pretty cool. The hottest new programming language now is English. So, this is going to be wonderful. And my son, who's 14, is a gamer and fantasy basketball, football, baseball. So he's a quant. Like, he understands probability. He benches players and starts players based on stats. Something I didn't learn until grad school. And he's got it at 14. So believe you me, I'm not a digital native. My son is a digital native.
You're a digital evangelist.
So I look at a combination of all of these skills, and I say companies will continue to hire based on your rate of learning and good judgment. So that's important. But I also think that we as business leaders, we need to operate not like cooks, but like chefs. Mm-hmm. My last graduate class was 1997. I'm old. And I couldn't Google for answers. Google was born in 1998. So when I think about the last 20 some odd years, 30 some odd years, all these new ingredients, cloud computing, mobile technologies. I had to convince my CIO in 2007, we got to allow our employees to bring this device because all the apps that are there, social networks, all the arguments I've had about blockchain and distributed ledger when I was investing in 2018 in crypto and people thought I was nuts. I feel a little bit better now. A cook follows a recipe. Mm-hmm. And if that recipe is not there, you might not be able to produce delicious outcomes, food. A chef understands the taste of ingredients. And we are now witnessing from quantum to 3D to all the derivative AI. We've been talking about generative, about computer vision, natural language processing, smart robotics, the dozens of derivatives off this AI umbrella. If you're running your business and you're not thinking like a chef, if you don't know how to absence of a recipe, combine these new ingredients to create beautiful new outcomes, I don't know how you can survive and thrive and grow. So regardless of the skills, creative systems thinking, programming, creativity, humanities, philosophy we talked about this morning, all of these things that help you be a good person, please continue to do that and be an advocate of that. That's how you're going to increase adoption of these new ingredients in business. But operate like a chef, not a cook. And I think that's ultimately what I think I'm going to advise my 3 kids who are so much smarter than I am. But I don't have those strong conviction in terms of guiding them where to go. Honestly, I don't know. Stay teachable is probably the best advice I can give because
I love it.
Things are moving really fast.
Stay teachable. Learn every day. I know when I do this all the time. I know when our panelists started talking about their family, things are getting interesting.
Well, your family, I mean, you just said very briefly in your intro, I mean, Accenture committed a year and a half ago, $3+ billion to upskill, reskill 80,000 of their employees.
Yes.
That's larger than my company. To become AI, deep analytics, data literacy. I think you're north of 60,000 already, and the target was end of 2026. So you're way ahead of and then you invested $1 billion in a learning platform on top of that. You know, it's not just talking about it, it's putting your dollars, and when you say digital core, that's important. Also an Accenture study, if you spend 6% every year incrementally on innovation and about 15% in terms of your technical debt, you're likely to be in a population of companies that has 60% growth in revenue and 40% in margin. Those are stunning numbers, but there is a commitment required, financial commitment, to be able to scale.
I think I completely agree. I think it's not being complacent, right? And also, I love your phrase of being the chef, not the cook, right? Always thinking about innovating, ahead of everyone. Something that my personal mantra, and I'm, using this with my team all the time, right? Counter the change with the changelessness, right? Because that's the essence of what you just talked about.
It's really learning by first principles versus learning by analogy.
Yeah.
And things are moving so fast. There's so much confusion. It's multidimensional in terms of just the first panel today, listening to Scott and Rita. If you watch the movie Oppenheimer, Niels Bohr, who was a theoretical physicist who won Nobel Prize in 1922, at one point turns to Oppenheimer and says, we need to convince politicians that this isn't new technology. This is a new world. And I don't want to equate AI to atomic, but it's a new world.
Yeah.
And the train is moving really fast, so please don't stand still.
Yeah. I cannot agree with you more. And I think the takeaway for all the innovators, startup leaders, academias here is you hear the excitement, right, about this technology from the business leaders. I think there's still a lot of gaps, right, in terms of adoption. So we will need all kinds of help, right, from you guys to bring new tooling, new technology, new theories, right, new change management theories, new skills that all of our employees need to learn. I see that as an awesome opportunity to collaborate, even with everyone in the room here.
I just want to add one thing, and my son just graduated with information systems degree, and he's a software developer. And he was asking the same question. And this is what I've told my team too. When you're hiring, look for people with curiosity, healthy skepticism, and a learning mindset.
Very good.
I think those are the ingredients that will actually help you adapt and change and continue to improve. Everything else, technical skills, etc., will aid you. But if you are missing those 3, it's going to be a tough world to move into.
Very good advice. All right, so let's continue this theme of discussion. So Savannah, as a strong advocate for understanding the impacts of science and technology on society, what skills and awareness do you think are essential for teams working on Gen AI? From you do so much research, right? Anything that we can take away with?
Yeah, I think there are 2 kind of sets of skills that are really important for teams working with Gen AI. So the first is On the technical side, we've heard a lot of great information today about the very real limitations that still exist around this technology, around foundation models, around generative AI. And I think it's very important that especially business leaders stay educated and stay engaged with these kind of conversations. We're often sold a narrative that, this technology is sort of foolproof, it's extremely functional, it's approaching artificial general intelligence, we're approaching superhuman intelligence, but there's a lot of research, some of which we've heard today, that shows there are a lot of failure modes that still exist, and it's incredibly important to keep those in mind. We need to be teaching our employees how to understand model generalizability, what kind of performance you can actually expect. These models are, especially when we move out of a lab context where these models are typically developed into a real world context where the data is messier, the decisions are messier. We have often this added context of actual users who add a lot of noise and variability to our nice mathematical models. So I think, staying apprised of the limitations of these models, the research that's going on in that space. Particularly, I liked the point that was made earlier about, these are not causal engines still. They're not designed to be. They are inherently probabilistic, and so they are going to continue to hallucinate, and you cannot expect them to perfectly model your problem. So keeping all of those limitations in mind. I also really like the point that Bhavesh made about, kind of the difficulty of data readiness in enterprise and in any kind of real world application. I teach data science master's students in their final semester, and I teach them AI ethics, and I give a lot of case studies about, here's a real system that was built, it was deployed, and someone else did an audit afterwards, or they did a study, and they found out that the model was really racist, or the model just didn't work at all. In the lab, they got a 95% accuracy. When they deployed it, it was worse than randomly guessing. And we talk about why that happened. And it's often, that people, when we're training data scientists, we're giving them nice, clean benchmark data sets or nice, classroom exercises. And that's just not what data looks like in practice. So teaching skills about how your data collection process influences what the data looks like, how you merge data from different systems in your business from different years. Like hearing you talk about, you have data that might be 100 years old. I feel like we're not talking to our students about those kind of challenges. So I think those things are really important. And then there's also, I think, soft skills, especially if we want to be really responsible with our AI use. There are soft skills that we need to develop as well. And I think one of the things that's really important in that space is how do we talk to our customers and society more broadly about what people actually want out of technology. I'm really excited about AI and generative AI. I know we all are, but what do people actually want that to look like? How do they want to use these things? How do they want to interact with it? And how can we communicate to people what our systems and models are doing, especially if you have any kind of user or consumer-facing chatbot or trip planning tool or assistant or any of these things. We're talking about how hard it is for us all to get a handle on what this technology is. I think it's really important that we work on skills to talk to our customers and to a society more broadly about how these tools work, and also to develop transparency best practices to help build trust, because things are, like we've said, are shifting so rapidly with this technology. You want to maintain trust with your users and your consumers, and there's a lot of research showing that transparency is really key to that, but it's also hard to do technical transparency well. So I think that's an important skill to develop as well.
Okay, awesome. What's your course number? Can we all go back to Columbia and take it? That sounds awesome. All right, so for the next, I would say 10 minutes, I want to come back to the panelists. I know you are all making very important decisions within your company, organizations, every day, but please resist the temptation. Only share one key decision that you will make in the next 12 months to drive broader adoption of AI in your organization. Vala, you want to start from there?
For me and my team, it's just working more closely with our customers. Innovation opportunities are at the edges. We always hear put the customer in the center of your business. I don't think I've ever had a customer ask me in my career, put me in the center of Salesforce. So what you want to do is put yourself on the edge of your customer's business and see how they delight their stakeholders, their customers, employees, and partners. And that's where innovation opportunities exist. So when we define agents, we know we have to understand the jobs to be done. We have to understand the data that needs to be provided for that job to be done properly. We have to understand actions that we humans define for the agents to execute, the guardrails, actions that cannot be executed by digital employees or agents, and then the channels where we want to expose the smart software to our stakeholders. And that's capacity planning. That's really understanding at a precision level the various tasks that make up your sales, your service, your marketing, your HR, whatever the line of business it may be. So more and more our customers are expected to operate like surgeons with precision and purpose. And so for companies like Salesforce, we need to really deeply understand how they delight their stakeholders, which means we have to be on the edge of their business. So more time there. And then no matter how big, no matter how successful your company, there's always more smart people on the outside than on the inside.
Very well said. I think something, decades, old, right? The customer centricity, customer obsession. You're going to make some decisions important there. Yeah, very good. How about Bhavesh?
I would say prioritizing a few big bets.
How do you prioritize?
I think we've learned enough, right? Like, I think you can, at some point, you're going to have to,
make a choice.
Or get off the pot.
Yep.
and I think we're at the phase now where we've learned enough. And I think it's now about putting your money where your mouth is and start talking to your customers externally about these things and start telling your employees internally, this is how we're going to reorganize ourselves and this is what we're going to bet on. And I think that, a lot of organizations are either going to have to do that or forever, just continue to noodle around and experiment and just talk about it on earnings calls.
Very well said. How about Soumya?
Yeah, I think we already made a decision to have a separate AI org and a separate data org because there's different levels of maturity and levels of complexity on both sides. So in the next 12 months, I'm excited to be able to see them mature, have the platform mindset, put the governance in place and have a couple killer apps that drive value. Because at the end of the day, it's about value. That's what the business is looking for.
For Corning.
Sorry?
What is your dream killer app? I was at a conference yesterday. They show image AI for application for consumer to design a water bottle.
Yeah. No,
something like that.
I think we have great opportunities in research and manufacturing. So to try and figure out what one of those will be, there's a litany, but honestly, I'll have to sit with my research team and say, okay, which one's the biggest differentiator for you?
Can't wait for that. Maybe next year when we meet again, you can bring the killer app here.
Absolutely. That would be amazing if I could bring a killer app.
Okay, wonderful. How about Savannah?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm in my role not making actual business decisions for the most part, but what I would encourage people to think about is how to really construct methodology for impact evaluation. A lot of the focus that I see is on building a model or taking an existing model and fine-tuning it and just getting it out, getting it integrated in some functionality of your company. And I think actually measuring how well that works, if it's having the effect that you intended, is quite challenging. So I think investing more effort there, thinking about how you do model monitoring, how you do testing of outcomes, how you can tell if a model has depreciated and it's no longer working the way that you want it to, what kind of interventions can you take. I think that's a big area that folks should be focusing on.
That's awesome. And I think that your expertise in material science and combination of that in Gen AI, I think a lot of business leaders would love to explore, right, including myself, because we've been working with Vision AI for a long time, but as all of a sudden we jump to the 3D, I think we're missing a lot of the finessing, a lot of the details that you just talked about. How do I use image to detect the particles of the objects, the aroma of the whatever this environment, right? Just like how humans are very multisensory, I think AI still has some gaps there. So look forward to some latest research there. How about Rose?
So maybe just because earlier I mentioned that I'm actually do function company. One side I manage the business planning function, and the other side on the data AI. The funny thing is, on the planning side, we were referred as the brain of the company. But thinking about it, that the brain is working, but there's no nerve down to the body, so and then no feedback loop, right? So the next thing, or the coming 12 months, going to be very critical for us is to build a proper digital core, and then having those what is happening on the edge and pulling back all the way to corporate office and getting that connection, right? The brain needs to function, need to understand what's going on, and then you have to replan and send the signal out. So this is during that journey, building the foundation, and then I also just incorporate what I said earlier is during that process, we will deliver value on the way because there are a lot of things ready to go, and we will experiment, and so those things, those learning should go to drive value first, while funding the more complex project. When the foundation built to a certain level, then we can address what's on the ground and from the operation space. So that
Great. Can't wait for that. Yes,
Can I just riff on that a little bit? When we talk about brain and biology, as we adopt automation and hyper-automation, companies will start resembling living organisms. Yeah. We're pretty automated, right? And you can be brain dead and still live. Yeah. But if your circulatory system fails, you cease to exist. So we have our lungs that breathe air. It's a pump, our lungs. Our heart beats, 60, 100 beats. Our cardiovascular system, a pump. And then our oxygenated blood goes through our arteries and deoxygenated blood through our veins. So the systemic, the cardiovascular, and pulmonary makes our circulatory system. Sales, service, marketing, commerce, all these lines of business in your companies that capture information, analyze, and disseminate for the betterness of the company and ecosystem, these are just pumps. And in a healthy body, the relationship between the pumps is as important as the pump itself. So yes, the brain is important. But what you do with all that knowledge in terms of sharing between departments and pumps, if your circulatory system in your business isn't healthy, you will cease to exist. So it's not just having the data or having all that intelligence, it's what you do with it.
So well said. It's about activating all this and also connecting all this. You can have the best heart, doesn't work, right? And you mentioned earlier, and I completely agree, I think all the enterprise messiness that we are encountering every day is because of the silos. It's because of a human-created silos, unintentionally, right? So now we all need healthy bodies. I'm so glad that this panel ends on humans.
Thanks. This talk, I definitely want to check with Vala. We should all go learn biology. Biotech will be the future.
Okay, very good. So we have 15 minutes left. I'm going to turn to the audience here. Hopefully you find this discussion enlightening. It's totally unscripted. We just met 15 minutes, 2 hours ago, okay? But I felt like we can be spending, 2 days together now, okay? So let's challenge them with some questions, okay? If you have a specific person that you want to ask question, oh yeah, sure. The mic is here? Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Fabulous conversation. My name's Susan David. We are obviously in an AI revolution, but I think what's implicit in every single one of these sessions is that the true revolution that we are in is a human skills revolution, because knowledge is rapidly becoming commoditized. And what we're seeing is a confluence not only of this escalation in AI, but we are also simultaneously seeing an escalation in a mental health crisis worldwide that no organization is going to be spared from. The World Health Organization predicts, for example, that by 2030, depression will be the single leading cause of disability globally, outstripping cancer, outstripping heart disease. And so for me, when I hear these conversations and 1 million, people being displaced potentially by automation, I think really what it invites us to ask is, what are humans for? What are humans for? What are the key skills that as human beings, separate from, well, I'm going to recruit for curiosity, but how are we actually developing curiosity, values-based decision-making, empathy, perspective-taking, collaboration? How are we actually developing these skills within our organizations? And what I'm seeing in organizations is that there's a lot of hand-waving around these skills, but there is a fundamental mismatch between what is really needed from human beings and our current ability to develop these skills. And so my invitation, my passion is this, but I'm curious as to how you are thinking about this, how you're having these conversations. As an example, if we think about empathy, the current fiction that exists in this multi-billion-dollar learning industry in our organizations, the fiction is that if you go and watch a 2-minute LinkedIn video on empathy, you will become empathetic. And yet we know the conversations about human psychology, that is not how human psychology works. And so I'm just curious about how we're thinking about true human skills development in the context of the AI revolution and the way we are addressing these kinds of human needs and the displacement that will come from it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vish, why don't you start?
Thank you. Any perspective?
I
don't think
was hoping you wouldn't ask me, but okay. Firstly, I think you're right. We've worked together on a variety of things for our company, and I would say it is a lot of hand waving. And to be honest, I think it starts with incentives and what is the purpose of a company to its shareholders, to its board, and to its people. And funnily enough, as much as people like to say, our people are really important, the people are the last, right? Let's be honest, the people generally are the last. And so I think that, your point about depression and the cause of depression and how that's, becoming widespread is a really important conversation to have as it relates to new technologies that are creating that are actually going to disrupt a lot of our lives, right? And I think that's why I go back to how I started answering the question on what am I excited about. It's actually about elevating our people to do differentiated work using this technology. It is actually not about automating them or, but replacing them with agents or things like that. I think it should be more about how do we use this technology to create a better, more fulfilling life for our employees, for our kids, for our partners. Otherwise, what's the point? This so-called technology is apparently going to get us to the 3-day or the 4-day weekend. I hope it does, because we'd all like to do more enjoyable things and to be outside. And I think that's the framing that we need. And I'll give you an example about how we as leaders can help. So, I'm Chief AI Officer for S&P Global, but I'm also CEO of this small kind of startup incubator type of company called Kensho Technologies. And I have the flexibility to do different things at this place, right? And one of the things that we do is we have flexible Fridays. And flexible Fridays is more about flexible Friday afternoons, really. And that afternoon is about how do you want to use that time for learning, for starting your weekend early, for going and spending some time giving back. And interestingly, you hear lots of different ways in which our people are using that time. Sometimes it's to hit a milestone at work, but a lot of times it's about, hey, I want to develop my knowledge in this, or I actually want to go spend some time with my mother or my father. And it actually enriches their life a lot more, and they kind of come back more engaged in their work, thinking about how can I provide more meaningful work to my coworkers, to myself, and then to the community at large. And I think those are the ways that we kind of need to help shift. I don't think it's going to be some big bang. I think it's going to be these microcosms of really interesting things that are happening and then trying to scale them. Because ultimately, it's very hard if you're the CEO of a big public company to think about all your stakeholders and make everybody happy. And I think it's too big for any one person or an organization to fix.
Okay.
I think the one thing I'll just add is what we've been saying, the tagline is humans plus AI is better outcomes. So we're just trying to emphasize that you need oversight by a human. You can't de facto trust what the machine tells you. So working in conjunction will be better value and better outcomes for the company, the community, the world, hopefully. But making sure that the human piece is there is how we're trying to address it.
For us, it's definitely partner with HR. There's going to be a big change of future of work. But on the other hand, how to retrain, upskill our people, right? So that they can do more meaningful work instead of those repetitions, as well as being more innovative and focus on growth. Because this is digital economy. I don't know if the research is there, but I certainly think there will be new things come out and really need the people have those basic skills and then can handle. So they may even, for example, in one company, maybe that becomes so productive, you don't need that many people, but they will find definitely more meaningful things to do. That's really my belief.
And I just quickly add too, I really like this question. And I think that we need a culture shift in how we think about AI and the value of humans. I think a lot about this conversation I had with the Director General of CERN, where she said art and science are like the core human endeavors. And that really resonated with me. And yet I see so many startups, companies work in the AI space that are like, let's automate these two things. Let's automate art, creativity, science, inquiry. And I think, we have a chance to resist that narrative. We can think about what is uniquely human, or at least what is valuable that humans do. And we can choose to incorporate that into our business decisions. We can decide, we want to use AI here and not here. And I think, this is a really important conversation to have.
Wonderful.
So,
all right, let's try to take two more questions.
Yeah, just a quick question all the way over here on the side. Sorry if you can see me over here. So first of all, thank you. Just great to hear the diverse perspective you all bring. So thank you for that. I have a question for you about the job market, and I'll get there in a second. So I think one of the themes that I've heard today is a lot around uncertainty. And that uncertainty has both sides to it. There's a lot of good uncertainty because there's so many problems to solve that the opportunities are enormous. And then I think in the morning, Scott Anthony said, well, every major moment of technology revolution comes with a dark shadow. That's the other side of uncertainty. And so what I want to ask you sort of more specifically is flip it from uncertainty to certainty. Over the next 3 to 5 years, where do you have high confidence or more certainty on how you think the job market is going to change? Or do you think it's going to play out longer? So let's take it away from we don't know, or there's a lot of uncertainty, to where do you see actually change happening in the job market for the everyday business? Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, and what you all are seeing. And do you think the job market and how people are hiring is actually going to change? And how is that going to play out, do you think, in the next 3 to 5 years?
So we're working with our HR team to try and think about what does the workforce of the future look like. And honestly, there is a lot for us to absorb and try and figure out. There are decisions we make that'll shape it. There's technology trends that'll shape it. But I can't tell you what it'll look like in 3 to 5 years, but we're not waiting to find out. We're actually actively working with HR, with strategy, with communications teams to try and say, okay, what does this look like? There is a lot of theory. I think this morning someone said that 44% of the jobs in the US are going to be automated. But in which areas? And does that apply to our company? Because I don't think it's a uniform answer for every company. What we do is different than what he does, what Vala does, or what Bhavesh does. So I think it's more important to make sure you're working with HR to actually think about workforce of the future and do workforce planning, and then define where we want to automate, what we want to automate, what pace you want to move in to actually get the answer. How we hire is going to be dependent on that workforce plan. And where we hire is going to be dependent on that workforce plan in terms of levels and the competency skill sets. So
what I'm certain about is in order to compete and win in a knowledge-sharing, hyper-connected, more decentralized economy is you have to deliver value at the speed of need. And we don't get to dictate that speed. It's our customers. In the Army Futures Center, there's a concept called decision dominance, where in order to win a battle, win a war, you have to be able to sense, understand, decide, and act. They call it the SUDA model. This is how they develop weaponry and SUDA model: sense, understand, decide, and act, and do it at machine scale. Because your response time is measured in like nanoseconds, not faster than any human can operate. So you have now machine scale SUDA in business. There's pressure in business to sense a marketing intent or a buyer signal or a dissatisfied customer in service or an employee who might jump ship because they're not satisfied with their boss or their culture and their environment. So businesses now have to adopt a SUDA model: sense, understand, decide, and act. And that delta T, I'm certain, from sense to act, is going to converge to zero. We call real time. So I don't know how companies can compete in the future if you don't have a SUDA model that has a machine multiplier in everything that you do. And that doesn't mean absence of humans. It just means you need to operate at a different. I think Rita said, 10x at 1/10 the cost. That I'm certain that my company and most of the fastest growing companies that we advise, these are double-digit compound annual growth rate companies that are crushing it within their industries. That's what they care about, and that's what I'm certain about. I'm not really certain about anything, but I'm highly confident that. Fast Smart is going to be a driving factor in investment thesis in technology.
So just one quick one, because that's like from education and training perspective, that's a very recent conversation I have with our SVP of HR is, okay, when we look at it, the data AI is not even in competency category. So this is a whole thing mything for the company ready to, progressing in this field. So at least in the near future, my view is everyone needs to get some sort of education on what data and AI is. That's a basic, and then that becomes a norm, right? Everyone needs to have that, the basic, because that's how you will live and then work in future. So I just want to add that point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I can quickly add. I don't think there's a crystal ball, right? When I heard that question, I think that struck me very, very hard because we are in service industries, right? So you can imagine we got asked this kind of questions all the time. But I think, baking the changes into every formula that we're bringing to the client so that we are adaptable and resilient, that has to be part of the answer. And I think the second thing that we are doing so that we can stay bullish, right, in this market, in this kind of uncertainty is actually push out the demand curve, right? And how do we actually, like in Accenture's case, not just acting as the enabler of AI, should we also be considering to become the builder of AI, right? Builder of AI in the enterprise AI context, right? So that we can grow new demand, help our clients more, and ultimately drive more employment. So a couple things to add. All right, I think we can do one more question, maybe 35 seconds.
Can I go? Sorry, my name is Vedant. I'm an MBA student at Harvard, and I'm very interested in sort of spending a lot of time thinking about agents for manufacturing. And I think, with a lot of people are focused on automation, as Vala spoke about, 1 billion agents by next year. And when you think about enterprise software historically, a lot of value was captured by augmenting human workflows rather than automating them. So I'm often struck, do we sort of think about building and sort of helping humans work better, or do we go and sort of try to automate workflows and replace humans in workflows that exist today?
Yeah. Maybe I will take that first because it seems to be quite fit with what we strategically, how we think about it. Mm-hmm. I would say in manufacturing environment, that will be augment instead of replacing, because just think about it, safety is the license to operate, and that's such critical area that you have to understand where Gen AI works, how you design the system in a way is leverage human and machine combination. This is in manufacturing environment, I would definitely say it is a combination, because such critical area with safety, with anything happen, if anything goes wrong, it's a significant implications, not just for the company's financial, but could be also environmental impact and then a human's life, right? So for those areas, is my view is definitely augment, not replacing. But the way you augment how the operators make decisions is, as we discussed a lot of in the past 1 hour and 30 minutes, is how we build those foundation and build up this complex area, but it's a significant value. And also from safety perspective, you could learn from history all the safety event quickly. That's a quick win and a foundational area. So.
If you watched Iron Man, I am hopeful to get my own Jarvis one day. So,
All right, so let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you, everyone.